The program is for Black residents who lived in Evanston between 1919 and 1969 and their direct descendants.
Interest rates are on their way down. What does that mean for you?
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by Amazon Business, focused on offering smart business buying solutions, leaving time to focus on growth. More at amazonbusiness.com. And by C3 Generative AI, verified traceable answers, secure hallucination-free, LLM-agnostic, IP liability-free C3.ai. This is Enterprise AI.
From Marketplace, I'm Sabri Benishore, in for David Brancaccio. Now that the Fed has started to cut interest rates, are we headed back to that world of cheap money, cheap mortgages? What do lower interest rates mean for you? Marketplace's Nancy Marshall-Genzer is here live to talk about it. Hi, Nancy.
Good morning.
So how will yesterday's rate cut, half point, affect the typical consumer?
The cost of borrowing for things like car loans, credit cards, and personal loans should be dropping soon. But the Fed rate cut was already baked into mortgages. Still, Powell says the Fed's rate cuttings will help in the long run.
I mean, ultimately, by getting inflation broadly down and getting those rates normalized and getting the housing cycle normalized, that's the best thing we can do for householders.
So what is going to happen with mortgages then?
Well, that depends on what the 10-year Treasury bond does. Mortgage rates are loosely tied to the yield or interest rate on 10-year Treasuries. It might trend up now, so you could see mortgage rates actually rise.
Oh my gosh. So what do we do with that?
As always, Sabri, what happens next depends on the data. The Fed releases projections about things like interest rates 4 times a year. Yesterday, Fed officials predicted another half-point reduction in rates this year, but Fed Chair Powell kept emphasizing the Fed is not on a preset course and will take it meeting by meeting.
The actual things that we do will depend on the way the economy evolves. We can go quicker if that's appropriate. We can go slower if that's appropriate. We can pause if that's appropriate.
And Powell says the Fed isn't ready to declare mission accomplished on inflation just yet.
All right. Marketplace's Nancy Marshall-Genzer. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Grocery chains Kroger and Albertsons want to merge. The Federal Trade Commission does not want that, saying a merger would reduce competition, and it sued to block the deal back in February. Closing arguments wrapped up this week, and at the center of the case is who Kroger and Albertsons actually compete with. Also, what is a supermarket? Marketplace's Stephanie Hughes has that.
In cases like this, the FTC has to define the market, determine who's in it, and what would happen if 2 of those competitors merged. Chris Segers is a law professor at Cleveland State University.
You have to know what sort of competition they would face if they raised prices. What alternatives could consumers turn to?
In this case, the FTC is defining the supermarket market. Douglas Farrer, the agency's director of public affairs, says it considers supermarkets to be one-stop shops for groceries.
They typically have a broad and deep assortment of products and a variety of package sizes.
And lots of inventory. Also bakeries, delis, maybe a florist. Farrer says the FTC counts Walmart, the nation's largest grocer, and Target as supermarkets, along with the stores owned by the 2 companies in this case, Albertsons and Kroger. He says they're rivals that compete with each other on price.
And if they merge, that competitive dynamic will go away and we could see prices rise.
The FTC says there are other retailers that sell groceries that don't compete with supermarkets in the same way. Those include wholesale club stores like Costco, which often require membership fees, and dollar stores, along with what it calls limited assortment grocers like Aldi that carry fewer brands. It also excludes premium natural and organic stores like Whole Foods, which it says generally have higher prices. So the FTC isn't considering any of them as supermarkets, says law professor Chris Segers.
You know, admittedly, the market definitions that the government alleges here are pretty narrow.
Segers says the FTC is arguing that while consumers can shop for some of the same products at these other retailers, those stores are still not substitutes for a supermarket.
They're not interchangeable enough that no one will be hurt by this merger.
One of the companies involved, Albertsons, said in a statement that the way the FTC is viewing the grocery industry is, quote, outdated. And Brian Albrecht, chief economist at the International Center for Law and Economics, says the grocers are pushing for a much wider definition of a supermarket, one that includes those club, dollar, and organic stores.
They argue if you allow the merger through, because we have these competitors, we're not going to be able to raise prices. In fact, we need this merger in order to compete with Walmart and Costco.
Albrecht says ultimately defining a market is meant to help figure out how it will then change if one particular deal goes through. I'm Stephanie Hughes for Marketplace.
All right, let's do the numbers. Markets love those rate cuts. Dow, S&P, NASDAQ futures are all up in the 1.2 to 2.1% range, with Dow futures up 488 points. The yield on the 10-year Treasury, 3.704%.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by Progressive Insurance, helping protect small businesses and the owners who run them. Whether a plumber, accounting business, or restaurant, Progressive can help with over 30 customizable coverages. Online quotes available in as little as 6 minutes at progressivecommercial.com. And by Barron's Streetwise podcast, hosted by Barron's Associate Editor Jack Howe, offering insights each week on business leaders and trend spotters, available everywhere.
The Securities and Exchange Commission this week said it wants to allow many stocks to trade not just in dollars and cents, but dollars and cents and half cents. So what difference does that make? Marketplace's Justin Ho has that.
Every time stocks are bought and sold, there's always a third party that makes the trade happen.
There's a market maker, somebody who's providing the liquidity in that market, who's connecting the buyers and the sellers.
Evan Raleigh at the University of Connecticut says that market maker gets a cut of every trade by giving the seller of a stock a little less than what the buyer pays. The cut can vary depending on how hard it is to match a buyer and a seller. But for popular stock trades, that cut is often the bare minimum, a penny.
That doesn't seem like too much, but there are a lot of trades that are going at the minimum. That means that probably the minimum could be lower.
The Securities and Exchange Commission argues that by allowing popular stocks to trade in half-cent increments, transaction costs will fall. Thomas Ernst at the University of Maryland says while individual investors might not notice a difference,
a half penny here, a half a penny there across millions of investors and millions of trades is what adds up to considerable savings for retail investors.
The SEC's new rule will take effect in November of next year. I'm Justin Ho for Marketplace.
And in New York, I'm Sabri Benishore with the Marketplace Morning Report. From 8 p.m., American Public Media.